Hi.
Evening, Adrian.
Hi, Gabby. How are you?
I'm fine, and welcome all to My 70s with me, the Gabby Cabby, and former Colchester, Hillingdon, Vancouver, Seattle Sounders, Pittsburgh Spirit, and Phoenix Inferno star, Mr. Adrian Webster. How are you? You okay?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, thanks. And yourself?
Yes, I'm very good. We're going to call this episode Born in 1974 because that was the year that the wonderful Kings of Cascadia, the Seattle Sounders, were formed. But we're going to firstly go back to 1951, where all great footballers, English footballers, were born. You on, what was it, the 6th of November, and Hudson on the 21st of June. And you started your life in that wonderful town of Colchester, didn't you?
That's right, Gabby. I joined my hometown club, Colchester United, as a schoolboy when I was 14.
Yeah.
And at 15, I was offered an apprenticeship, and the manager at the time was, and you might remember the name, Neil Franklin. He was former Stoke City and played for England, but I think he was maybe born in South Africa, but he was the manager at the club at that time.
Wow. Now, I do a little bit of research. I didn't know that because Neil Franklin went over to Colombia and played in the El Dorado League, didn't he? And as a consequence, he got banned.
I'm not really sure on that, Gabby. I know that I thought it was somewhere in South Africa that he had a playing career, but I'm not 100% sure now.
Yeah, he definitely went over to Colombia. There was a few English players. Charlie Mitten from Man United was another one. And I'm sure that as a consequence, England wouldn't pick them. I might be incorrect, but it was called the El Dorado. It was the league. Di Stefano played over there as well. There was a lot of Argentinians that played over there. But as some of the careers diminished because of the way that the English authorities were, Alfredo Di Stefano's career just took off.
Yeah, my only recollection of him as a player is because he was the manager. But as a schoolboy, I used to go in on my school holidays, and another player, Roger Jocelyn, and myself, would play against him and John Anderson, he's number 2, against head tennis every afternoon. And I can't ever remember us winning the game. He had such a great touch, and John Anderson had such a killer bullet-like header and volley. No, I can't ever remember winning the game.
Wow, I mean, he was some player. I remember my dad saying to me, he used to beat Birmingham pretty much on his own. He was that great a player, Neil Franklin. Wow.
Yeah, I'd heard that he was some player, and I think that, not that I was able to see him play, but it kind of come through in listening to him talk and his coaching theory and so forth.
Now, how long was Neil at Colchester with you?
Well, no, he was the one that offered me my apprenticeship.
Yep.
But by the time, if I can just step back, I was advised by my dad and our PE teacher to stay on at school and do my GCSEs. Yep. So at the end of that school year, I was offered the apprenticeship, but unfortunately Colchester United had been relegated and Neil got the sack. So I was actually signed by the board of directors on his recommendation. But prior to him getting the sack, I think he was probably there possibly 5 years as the manager, but a lovely man.
So who was your first manager when you signed for Colchester? And what was your first game? Can you remember that?
Yeah. I may have trouble saying this, Gabby, because he wasn't one of my favourites, but Dick Graham replaced Neil as the manager there, and that was my first season at the club as an apprenticeship, and during the first season, I mostly played youth team and reserves. I played in the southeast counties, and which produced and many great players: Huddy, Perryman, McDonald. A whole bunch of those guys played in that league, and then the reserve league was in the London Midweek League.
And then the first team. What was your debut like? How did you feel when you put that shirt on for the first time and run out for? I'm assuming your boyhood club.
To be quite honest, I never made a first team appearance game.
Okay.
This was one of the 15 and a half, 16. I was playing regular youth team and reserve football under Neil. And it was, my dream to play for my hometown club. Yeah. But unfortunately, when Dick arrived, the first thing he did, he got rid of 2 or 3 of the first team regular players, Duncan Forbes, Derek Trevis, and gradually brought in his own.
Yeah.
My first year at the club, I was the only apprentice, and to be honest, that was an 8 to 5 job. Day in, right, Monday through Friday, it would start by having to get the kid out for the pros, and then doing all the chores, and then training and playing, and during the week that could often be game on a Saturday, midweek game, and if I was playing in both the youth team and reserves. Initially, I can remember playing on a Saturday morning at 11 o'clock and a 3 o'clock game in the reserves in the afternoon. But that was all under Dick's resume. And as I said, I didn't play a first team game. And I don't know, where we're going to go, what direction we're going to go. We're going to continue with this. But I was really disappointed, obviously, not to make my debut for my home team, and that's one of the reasons that I eventually decided to leave the club.
And you went to Hillingdon, didn't you? What was the connection there? Who took you there?
Yeah, well, at the end of the 70 season, I played in a testimonial game for the Colchester United Club Secretary Claude Oren. And we played Millwall, and I was up against the Millwall and Chelsea lad. I can't think of his name at the moment. And I had a very good game. And on the weekend, our club skipper, who played right back, Bobby Cram, got an injury. And I thought, great, this is my opportunity. I'm in there. But sod's law, Dick went and chose Mickey Cook over me, and as they say, the rest is history, because Mickey went on to have a great career with the club, and unfortunately I didn't make my debut. And a little while later, after having been at the club as a pro for a year, I went and asked for my release.
And as I say, it was Hillingdon, wasn't it, that it was the place that you went to?
Well, yeah, that's where I ended up. But prior to that, once I'd gone to see Dick about getting my release, I had talked to Reg Tyrrell. I don't know whether you remember the name. He was the head of the youth at Ipswich, and had just gone to Bournemouth as the number 2 to John Bond.
Okay.
And before I actually signed for Colchester United, I had the opportunity to go to Ipswich. But because Colchester was my hometown, that's the club that I wanted to play for. At that time, Neil was the manager, and unfortunately, as I said, he got the sack. Dick came in, and so I phoned Reg to tell him, what my thinking was, and he said to, get my release, go and talk to Dick, and he said, come to Bournemouth for a trial. So I made arrangements to speak to Dick, and he invited me over to his home, and because I'd said to him I've got a chance to go to Bournemouth, and when I went over to meet with him, and he said, well, look, I can't let you go to Bournemouth. If you go there and do well, that's not going to look too good on his part. He said, but what I have done is I've got you fixed up at Hillingdon, and at that time it wasn't. I didn't really want to drop down a league. Hillingdon were in the Southern League, and so I got back on the phone to Reg, and Reg said, "Look, what I would do is I would go back to him, because when I signed pro, Gabby, it was usual that I was on £10 as an apprentice at the time, and so I was thinking £16 to £19 would be my wage when I signed pro, and I'd get the £250 signing on fee."
Yeah.
Well, he offered me £16, and I didn't get the signing on fee. So when I talked with Reg, he said, "Look, go back to Dick and tell him that you'll go to Hillingdon, but you want £19 a week plus the £250, and because it was part time, you want a full time job." And so I went back and said to Dick, and the next thing Dick calls me and said it's all agreed, and so I went to Hillingdon from there.
And then in 1971, on the 13th of February, Colchester played their probably the biggest giant killing game ever in the history of association football, when they got drawn out the hat to the great Leeds United. That was some day, because you played them for Hillingdon that day, you was telling me, and then you travelled back, didn't you, to watch the game, or to certainly link up with your pals that were still at Colchester.
Yeah, it's fun. How ironic is this, Gabby? Obviously, I knew I was going to be doing the show with you tonight, but I went out today and I just picked up my local Colchester Gazette and I started to go through it, and there's an article in here, obviously from the great result against Tottenham last week, but it's all about the Leeds game, and there's some lovely photos in there, and it then goes on to mention the cup game, the fifth round of the cup game against Man United in '79. But going back to the Leeds game, I remember playing that day. We were at home at Hillingdon, so the results were coming through, and at one time I think we were 3-0 up.
Yeah, you were, yeah.
And there was a part of me obviously that was disappointed that because I left in the February. They're playing Leeds, who at the time were probably the best team in the country.
Oh, without doubt.
Yeah, so anyways, I think Leeds come back to 3-2, and it was 12 minutes to go in the game, and the lads were able to hold on. But after our game, I never got out of that dressing room so quick in all my life. I was straight back up across London on the town, and met all my mates up at our local pub, and I think we must have celebrated through the night, from what I can remember.
And the great Ray Crawford, because there's obviously been local Ipswich and Colchester, and the connection there. They were, as you said, they got relegated. They were a fourth division team in them days. And Ray Crawford scored that day. He was playing for Colchester, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think he got two, actually.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Yeah, but what for Colchester to get somebody like Ray, and just going back to Dick a little bit, and I don't want to dwell on it too much, but he very much a sort of a regimental sergeant and a bit bully and that. But when Ray came in, Ray was the first player. I never saw Dick say a bad thing to him, against him, or anything. And Ray had this sort of persona about him, and was a very good player. And obviously, I didn't see on the day, but he was instrumental in getting that win over Leeds. And I think they'd worked on some set pieces and certain patterns of play that would bring Ray into it a little bit more. And on the day, he had a great game.
Now, your pal Bobby Cram took you to Vancouver, so from Colchester there to Hillingdon, all the way to Vancouver. That was one hell of a journey and a leap of faith there, wasn't it, for you, Aid?
Yeah, it was. I was kind of at the end of the Hillingdon season. It wasn't what I really wanted, and my plan was that I would get back in touch with Reg Tyrrell, who promised me the trial at Bournemouth. So it would have meant like not really doing anything during the off season, but then Bobby Cram finished his playing career at Colchester and got the Vancouver Spartans job. And he took 4 of us over, 2 Colchester boys and 2 boys from Ipswich. And at that time, when we went over, Bobby continued to be like player coach, and it was a really kind of exciting time, really, because my plan was to go there, play the season, and come back and take up the offer of the trial at Bournemouth.
Now, Vancouver, because you've got like the north there, because looking at this and researching,
yeah.
Cascadia is a bioregion, isn't it, in the great northwest that really consists of 3 major cities: Vancouver, Portland, Oregon, and then Seattle Sounders.
Yeah.
So and you battle for the cup. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but we're going to dwell on Vancouver at the present.
Yeah.
You played in a cup final, didn't you? And John Best scouted you up in 1973-74 season?
Yeah, it was 1972 when I went over to play for the Spartans, and it was a 12-team league within the inner suburbs of Vancouver. Yeah. And the league itself was a bunch of kind of ethnic groups so obviously that was my first experience of playing against all these different types of players. And it was a semi-professional league, and I think that year there was 12 teams in the league, so I think we played 24 games. Yeah. And we got off to a little bit of a slow start, but as we progressed in that, we got to this was in my second season. We got to the final of the State Cup. And at that particular time, and this was in 1974, it had just been announced that Vancouver had got a franchise in the North American Soccer League. Yeah. And there was a Scottish guy, Jim Easton, was coming over and was going to be the manager. So he invited a dozen players to trial and train with them. So I was one of those players, and I was working out with Vancouver or early doors. And then, as I said, I was still involved in playing for Vancouver Spartans, and we played in the final. And on that day, unbeknownst to me, and I didn't really know that Seattle had a franchise as well, but a guy called John Best had come down from Seattle I think he'd come down to watch a couple of the young Canadian boys that had started to make a name for themselves. I think Bobby Lenarduzzi was one, and Bruce Twomley. And so he came to the game, and after the game, he approached me about going to Seattle, and I listened to what he had to say, and I knew in the back of my mind that although I loved Vancouver, it was a lovely city, and I knew people, and that it was only going to be part-time the first season, the players. So when John told me that it was going to be full-time at Seattle and Jimmy Gabriel was going to be his player coach, I just jumped at the opportunity. I didn't know Jimmy, but I knew that he was at Bournemouth along with Harry Redknapp and one or two of the other guys that eventually came over and played for the Sounders. So the key thing for going to Seattle was that it was going to be full time, and that's the environment that I wanted to be in.
And it was such in its embryonic state, wasn't it? Football in America, for association football in this country. I mean, most of our clubs, started out founded in the 1800s. I mean, my team, Birmingham, 1875, Villagers down the road, 1874, and of course Notts County, 1863, and so on. But to be founded in 1974, and the American League really grew out of watching the World Cup finals of 66, and it was only 67 when Washington Whips played Los Angeles Wolves in the first All-American Cup final. So it was really such a new thing, wasn't it, there in America?
Yeah. Well, you just did touch on it, Gabby, but the NASL was actually formed in 1967.
Yeah.
So by the time I got into the league, which was in '74, it was starting to grow. But I think that in '74 is when it really started to kick off. And I think what people forget, Gabby, is America is such a big place, and you know, travel commitments and so forth, and lots of other things that come into play, you know, and then you're competing against the other major sports over there, the American football, basketball, baseball, you know, and unfortunately for a little while, I think the attitude of not probably early doors with the North American Soccer League that it was going to replace, you know, the American football and the basketball, and that was never going to happen. You know, soccer, you know, as they call it over there, is the biggest sport worldwide, and you know, as you've already mentioned, we have a history of it over here, but I think when Phil Wisdom came over and started it, and he was obviously a pioneer of the league, I think what he did was to try to regionalise the divisions.
But to be fair, as you've alluded to, the country is so big, it does need regionalising, didn't it? It was a great thing, and I think if it had been the whole of the US, it probably wouldn't have worked, because, I mean, you have to get on the planes to most of your games within your regions, don't you? Whether you're West Coast or East Coast.
Yeah, well, you know, being in Seattle, and the two nearest ones to us are Portland and Vancouver, which, you know, a car drive is hour 15 minutes, you know, either way. So many of in '74 when I came into the league, I'd never been used to, you know, flying to games, and then, you know, in some games we would be away up to 5 days. You'd play 3 games in that period of time. I can remember playing in Texas Stadium, Dallas, on a Saturday night, 7:45 kickoff, and then getting up early the next morning, flying to San Jose and playing in the afternoon. It was just, I think I lost a stone in weight in those 2 games.
It is just crazy, because the modern day football fan and player just doesn't understand what it was like football in the 70s. Now, in 1975, you developed one of the biggest rivalries in American football. We're going to call it football, because I don't like the word soccer, but football, because it's our game. And it was like the Timbers versus the Sounders. Did you play in that game? Because I know Peter Wiz was top goal scorer for the Portland Timbers. Did you play against Peter in that game?
Yeah, I've got a story there for you, Gabby. In '75 we made the playoffs, and I think because Portland finished above us, we had to go there for the playoff game, and we eventually got beat 2-1. But there was I was playing right back at the time, and the ball had been knocked wide on my side, and it's coming into me. And just as I'm going to play the ball forward, I could see out the corner of my eye Big Peter coming storming across, and I've just released the ball, and he's coming on a slide tackle, and I've seen him coming, and I've jumped up in the air, and as I've come down, both my feet have landed on his chest.
Oh, dear.
And I just landed on his chest, and I walked across his chest and face and left my stud marks across his body. And it's funny, because I was just looking at an interview you did with Peter. I don't know how recent it was, but he was a very good player. But we had a little bit of a confrontation over that, and that was in '75, and they were a very good team. They and that's I think during the regular season we beat them at our place, and they beat us at their place.
Now, in them days, was Timber Tim about? And because he put a phone call in, I don't know who run the Timbers, but I was watching this about the derby, Timbers and the Sounders, and it's like the Battle of Cascadia, and I am just open mouthed. And he phoned him up and says, "Do you mind if I bring a chainsaw into the ground?" Now, for an English person, if you phoned up Birmingham or Colchester or Man United and says, "Do you mind if I bring a chainsaw into the ground to celebrate a goal?" It's just so ridiculous. It's beyond words, isn't it?
It is, because my experience of when I first went to Vancouver, and another story, when my first game for Vancouver Spartans, we went back in at half-time and we came out, and I'm walking out with one of the guys that I went over with, a guy called Neil Partner, and we're watching these cheerleaders. We'd never seen it before, and we hadn't realised the game had kicked off. So when I went to Seattle, the first season there were like three, I believe they were like Filipino girls that were our cheerleaders. And then the next thing you know, you're going to San Jose and you've got Crazy George beating a drum, and you've got the guy in Portland with a chainsaw. So it was it just sort of it developed a different atmosphere to the game. Like with Crazy George, I remember playing in San Jose, and this is when Harry had come over, Harry Redknapp, and I was playing fullback, and I was perhaps going a little bit too far round on the cover, and then they started switching the ball out wide, and Harry was saying, get tighter, and I was up against Tony Simoes. Remember the Portuguese?
Not familiar with that name.
Yeah, he played in the same team as Eusebio.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyways, I was just getting there a little bit late, and by the time I got there, Tony had either released or got his cross in, and Harry was starting to give me a little bit bad time. So the next time I just went steaming in, and I took Tony Simoes out, and I got red carded for it. But so anyways, I've got my marching orders about I've got to go the length of the pitch. And I've got Crazy George following me back to the dressing room, beating on the drum. And by the time I got to near where the dressing room was, I got all these San Jose fans belting me with banana skins and everything else, But it was just nothing that I had experienced before. But everywhere you went, they had like a mascot or a Crazy George or a.
Let's still stay with Crazy George before we go back to the Timber Tim. Because you were just telling me about a penalty shootout, and there's a bear behind the goal.
Yeah, we played in Dallas, as I said, on the Saturday night, and then we went down to San Jose, and we'd won 1-0 in Dallas, and at the end of regulation time in San Jose, it was 2-2, and so you then went into a penalty. Initially, it was penalty kicks. They then introduced a penalty shootout, I think, a little bit later on, but. Anyways, every time Barry went to the goal, Crazy George went behind the goal and had a bear.
Was it his own bear?
I honestly don't know, Gabby, but it was on a chain, obviously. But every time Barry went, the bear would growl, and I think you could see Barry shaking in the goal. How we won the penalty shootout, I'll never know, but it was just crazy.
It sounds even worse than taking penalties at the old Den.
Yeah.
And then when you're playing Portland Timbers and they score against you and they come down and the chainsaw, what's that like when they do that and they hold that timber up? Because that looks absolute mental.
You know what? I don't think when you're actually playing and you're involved in it, I don't know whether it's a continuous thing, but every time when they scored a goal, you would go through that, and it was just, for me, it would just wind me up and get me even more. You want to get stuck into them, and. But in its way, it created an atmosphere there, and they still do it today, and this is 40 years on now, so it's just something that has grown as the club has.
And it's a real big rivalry, isn't it? It's like the Timber Army and the Seattle Sounders, and them Seattle Sounders fans seem an incredible bunch. I've looked at that clap that they done the other day, and they do the walk to the ground, the Emerald City, and it looks a fantastic place to play football.
Yeah, well, I was fortunate enough to go back a couple of seasons ago when I was given the Golden Scarf for my contribution to soccer over there, and I think there will always be comparisons.
And to listen to the rest of this podcast, head on over to www.patreon.com/SRB Media. Thank you.